Right now, you probably have food stored and most of it won't help you. Not because you bought the wrong brands, not because you didn't stock enough, but because most of what people call survival food only works under one condition, when everything is still mostly normal. Here's what disaster response research consistently shows. The average household has roughly 3 days of truly functional food. Not 3 days of calories, 3 days of food that can be opened, consumed, and converted into usable energy with no power, no running water, and no time to prepare anything. Everything else in your pantry right now is conditional, and conditional food is not the same as survival food. When infrastructure breaks down, the rice doesn't disappear. The pasta is still there, but the moment the stove goes cold and the water stops running, both become completely useless. So, the question isn't how much you have, the question is how much of it still works when everything else doesn't. These are the 12 best canned foods to stockpile before a serious disruption. Not ranked by popularity, ranked by what actually functions under real conditions. And the one sitting at number 1, almost nobody has it. Number 12. Canned soup. Most people see canned soup as the least serious item on any survival list. Too basic, too obvious. That instinct makes sense. It's also wrong. After 48 to 72 hours of serious disruption, the human brain doesn't crash dramatically. It slows down quietly. Decision fatigue sets in. Tasks that used to be automatic, including figuring out what to eat and how to prepare it, start to feel unreasonably heavy. At that point, people don't skip meals because they ran out of food. They skip meals because the mental effort of preparing food is more than they're willing to spend. That's the specific problem canned soup solves. Not because it's the most nutritious thing here, because it eliminates every variable between you and a meal. Open it. Eat it. Done. But there's one distinction that determines whether soup actually performs that function. Condensed soup still requires water. In a water-restricted scenario, that one extra step makes it unreliable. Ready-to-eat formulations require nothing, and under real depletion, the gap between 1 step and 0 steps is the gap between eating and not eating. One more thing people get backwards: the high sodium. Under normal conditions, that's a nutritional criticism. Under crisis conditions, it's an advantage. Stress and irregular eating accelerate electrolyte loss faster than most people expect. That sodium helps maintain hydration balance and prevents early collapse that has nothing to do with running out of calories. Takeaway: only stock ready to eat. Mesic not condensed. That single distinction determines whether soup actually works when you need it. Number 11. Canned chili. Here's a problem most survival lists never talk about directly. Most
Individual canned foods only solve part of the nutritional equation. Beans give you protein and carbs, but no fat. Vegetables give you micronutrients, but no sustained energy. Almost everything on a survival shelf needs to be combined with something else to become a real meal. And combining requires thought, energy, and resources that are all in short supply after a few days. Canned chili is one of the only real exceptions. A single can contains protein from meat, complex carbs from beans, fat from the meat component, and enough flavor to actually maintain appetite. That's 400 to 600 calories per can. One container, one complete meal, nothing else required. But there's a second reason chili ranks this high, and it has nothing to do with the nutrition label. Around day 3, appetite starts to deteriorate. Not because food is unavailable, because meals that are bland, repetitive, and texturally flat stop triggering the appetite response properly. People shift from eating to sustain to eating just to survive. And that shift has real physiological consequences. Caloric intake drops, energy drops, cognitive function drops. With it, chili interrupts that pattern. The texture, the flavor, the combination of components, the brain registers it as an actual meal. That matters more than the calorie count on the label. Take away, choose pull tab lid versions. Without a can opener, a standard lid turns
complete meal into something completely inaccessible. Number 10, music, canned beans. Most people think about survival food in terms of total calories. Eat enough, stay alive. That logic breaks down fast under real conditions. What actually matters is how long each meal keeps you functional before you need to eat again. Because every meal in a disruption costs something: time, fuel, decision-making capacity. Fewer meals means fewer resources spent on the act of eating itself. That's the case for canned beans. And music, it's more specific than people usually understand. Beans combine complex carbohydrates with plant protein. Music, that combination produces a slower, more sustained energy release than refined carbs or sugar. One serving can meaningfully extend the interval between meals. And over several consecutive days, that extension compounds in a way that genuinely matters. The comparison to dried beans comes up often. Dried beans are cheaper per calorie, that's accurate. But they require soaking, significant water, and music, a consistent fuel source to cook safely. Under disrupted conditions, those requirements frequently can't be met. Canned beans carry none of those conditions. Open the can, eat. One detail almost everyone gets wrong: the liquid inside the can. Most people pour it straight down the drain. That liquid contains soluble minerals and electrolytes leached from the beans during processing. Add it to soup, drink it directly, or incorporate it into any preparation. Nutrients recovered at zero extra cost. Takeaway, rotate across types: black beans, music chickpeas, kidney beans, lentils. Nutritionally similar, but the variety prevents food fatigue that quietly reduces your actual caloric intake after a few days. 3 down, and we're just getting to the part most survival guides miss entirely. If you found this useful so far, drop a quick comment telling me which one surprised you most. It helps me understand what to cover next. Number 9, canned chicken. Around day 3 or 4, something specific happens that almost no preparation guide accounts for. It isn't hunger, it isn't exhaustion, it's the absence of meat. Not protein as a macronutrient, the actual physical experience of eating meat. The texture, the resistance, music. The act of chewing through something with real substance. Soft foods satisfy your caloric needs. They don't satisfy the neurological expectation built into human eating behavior over a very long time. That absence doesn't register as a caloric deficiency, it registers as a
psychological one. And that affects behavior in ways most people don't anticipate, including skipping meals and declining morale. Canned chicken resolves this without refrigeration, without heat, and without any preparation beyond opening the container. The nutritional case is also solid. A standard can provide 40 to 50 grams of complete protein. Under elevated physical demand and poor recovery, muscle loss begins within days, not weeks. Adequate protein intake slows that process during exactly the period when physical capacity matters most. But canned chicken is better understood as a multiplier than a standalone item. Mixed into rice, protein complete meal. Added to soup, substantially higher nutritional density. Combined with canned tomatoes and beans, a complete dish. It elevates almost everything it goes into. Water-packed formulations are preferable. The neutral flavor integrates across more preparations without altering the base dish. Takeaway once opened, consume the full can or transfer to a sealed container and use immediately. Without refrigeration, partial storage leads to rapid spoilage. Protein is a resource you can't afford to waste. Number 8, canned tuna. Most survival guides treat cognitive function as secondary, something to address after physical needs are met. That's the wrong order. The decisions you make during the disruption about resource use, movement, then difflectionally as here Ellis, then differentialage, that ye. Condandalerd. Ephors with odor sites brach up on my froages, then pain. Adsori say, then. Then ebeluris. the no pit to ratchapel love and you would quest vals, vals, then. That.
And risk determine outcomes more directly than caloric intake alone. Decision quality depends on brain function, and brain function depends on specific nutritional inputs that most canned foods don't provide. Most canned foods maintain the body. Canned tuna does something more specific. It supports the brain. Tuna is a concentrated source of omega-3 fatty acids, specifically DHAA and EPA, the long chain forms the human brain uses for cell membrane structure and neurotransmitter function. A deficit in these doesn't produce dramatic symptoms. It produces something far more insidious. Gradual cognitive degradation, slower processing, reduced working memory, impaired decision-making under pressure. Under normal conditions, this deficit takes weeks to become noticeable. Under sustained stress, that timeline compresses. Research in this area is still developing, but the link between omega-3 status and cognitive performance is among the more consistently documented nutritional findings. The operational case is equally straightforward. No preparation required, no heat, no added water. One can supplement 2 or 3 separate meals and integrates into virtually any base preparation. Rice, pasta, soup, crackers. Water-packed offers more versatility. Oil-packed offers higher caloric density, a real advantage in cold or high exertion conditions. Takeaway: use tuna deliberately, not
Continuously. Rotate it in as a targeted cognitive support item rather than a daily staple. That's how you get consistent benefit without burning through your supply. Number 7, canned meat. Ask most people what the body needs most during a sustained crisis. They'll say protein, maybe carbohydrates. Almost no one says fat. That's the gap, and it's a significant one. Carbohydrates produce energy quickly. Protein maintains tissue integrity, but sustained physical output, especially in cold conditions or during extended exertion without adequate rest, requires fat as a primary fuel source in a way nothing else fully replicates. Fat delivers more than twice the caloric density per gram compared to protein or carbohydrates. More importantly, it burns slowly and steadily, providing sustained output energy across long intervals without additional intake. Canned meat, shelf-stable beef, pork products, potted meat delivers both protein and significant fat in a single container. No cooking, no refrigeration, no preparation. Caloric density per unit volume is substantially higher than most other items in this category. Here's the point that surprises most people. The high sodium content most instinctively see as a negative is actually a functional advantage under these conditions. It supports fluid retention and electrolyte balance during periods of irregular eating and physical stress.
Not a drawback, a feature. For best results, music. Pair canned meat with a carbohydrate source rather than eating it alone. The combination of fat and carbohydrate produces more stable, extended energy output than either consumed separately. And on shelf life, as long as the can maintains structural integrity and the seal is intact, the contents remain viable well beyond the printed date. This is stored energy that genuinely doesn't degrade. Takeaway: don't eat it alone. The combination with carbohydrates is significantly more sustaining. And that difference becomes very real after day 2. We're at the halfway point, and this next section covers something most lists skip completely. And it's arguably the reason technically good stockpiles quietly fail. If this video has been genuinely useful, a like helps this reach people who actually need it. Number 6. Canned tomatoes. By day 3 of eating from a stockpile, the problem most people run into isn't shortage. It's refusal. The brain's appetite regulation system depends on sensory variety. When every meal looks, smells, and tastes the same texture, same salt profile, same flat absence of brightness, the appetite signal weakens. Eating stops being automatic. It becomes an act of willpower, and under sustained stress, willpower is not a renewable resource.
This is the problem canned tomatoes solve, and it's the most underestimated problem on this entire list. Acidity is one of the primary triggers for saliva production and appetite stimulation. Adding diced or crushed canned tomatoes to a flat bean or rice preparation fundamentally changes the sensory experience of that meal. That sounds minor. Across several consecutive days, it's what keeps caloric intake from declining to a level that starts affecting physical and cognitive performance. Oh, was also a nutritional angle most people miss. The canning process increases the bioavailability of lycopene, a compound with antioxidant properties relevant to immune function under physical stress. In disrupted conditions, that's a measurable benefit, though it shouldn't be overstated as a standalone health claim. Storing multiple formats multiplies the functional range. Crushed tomatoes for sauces, diced for stews, paste for concentrated flavor in minimal quantities, maximum efficiency, minimal footprint. Takeaway: canned tomatoes don't replace anything else on this list. They make everything else on this list edible for longer. That function is irreplaceable. Number 5, canned vegetables. The human body doesn't signal micronutrient deficiency immediately. That's a biological feature, but in a crisis context, it becomes a practical problem. Vitamins and minerals operate below the threshold of conscious awareness during normal function. Their absence doesn't announce itself with dramatic symptoms early on. It shows up gradually. Slower recovery from physical exertion, reduced immune responsiveness, declining tissue repair. By the time those symptoms are obvious enough to identify, the deficit has been compounding for days. This is the gap in almost every calorie-focused stockpile, and it's exactly the gap canned vegetables fill. The case depends on variety, which is why stocking only one type defeats the purpose. Canned green beans provide fiber and vitamin K. Canned corn provides B vitamins and a carbohydrate contribution. Canned spinach provides iron and folate. No single vegetable covers the full micronutrient range the body needs under sustained stress. Rotating across types is a functional requirement, not a preference. Low-sodium formulations are preferable where available. You can always add salt at the point of consumption. You cannot remove it once it's in the can. Keeping that control matters when options are limited, and here's the detail almost everyone ignores. The liquid in the can, most people discard it automatically. It contains water-soluble vitamins and minerals leached during processing. Add it to soup, incorporate it into a stew, or drink it directly. Nutrients recovered at zero extra cost. 1 more tentril, avodolinol wastequartanically.
Point worth stating plainly, the visual variety of vegetables in an otherwise monotone meal creates a perceptual signal of normalcy. Green, yellow, orange. In an environment where nearly every sensory marker of normal life has been removed, that signal has a documented stabilizing effect on psychological state. Psychological stability is a resource in a crisis, and anything that helps preserve it has real value. Takeaway: stock multiple types, choose low sodium where available. Never discard the liquid. Every part of the can has value. Number 4, sweetened condensed milk. Most survival nutrition planning makes one assumption so basic that almost no one questions it, that the person will be willing and physically capable of eating normal food. It sounds obvious. It also breaks down more often than people expect. Sustained nausea from stress, extreme music fatigue, gastrointestinal disruption from sudden dietary changes. Any of these can create a state where solid foods become genuinely difficult to consume. Not because they're unavailable, because the body won't cooperate. When that happens, the rest of the stockpile becomes temporarily useless. Sweetened condensed milk exists for exactly this scenario. A single standard can contains over 1,000 calories in a liquid format that's easy to consume. easy to digest and requires zero preparation. For someone in a state of nausea or extreme depletion, it provides
a pathway to caloric intake that solid foods simply cannot. There's also a psychological dimension worth acknowledging. Sweetness is the taste profile most consistently associated with comfort and safety in human neurological conditioning. Under acute stress, a small amount of something sweet produces a measurable reduction in perceived threat. This is a physiological response, not just a comfort preference. And it has functional value in high-stress conditions, though it's not a substitute for proper nutrition. Here's the limitation, stated clearly. Condensed milk is very high in sugar. Without balancing it against slower digesting carbohydrates and protein, it produces an energy spike followed by a sharp drop. It's not a meal replacement. Think of it as an activation tool, something to restore minimal function followed immediately by more complete nutrition. Takeaway: store it for the moments when nothing else is working. No refrigeration required before opening. Use it to get functional again, then follow immediately with real food. Number 3. Canned pumpkin. Most people think about survival nutrition in terms of 3 things: calories, protein, maybe vitamins. What almost no one accounts for is the third thing that quietly starts to fail. And when it does, it undermines everything else: digestion. The foods most commonly stockpiled share a specific profile: dense, dry, and very low in fiber. White hot rice, crackers, pasta, canned meat, processed beans consumed over multiple consecutive days without a fiber source. The digestive system slows. Absorption efficiency drops. Really look discomfort increases. The desire to eat drops with it. This creates a compounding problem. The inability to properly process food, music, reduces both caloric utility and appetite, which accelerates the exact nutritional decline the stockpile was built to prevent. Canned pumpkin is the most effective and most overlooked solution to this problem. But there's a label distinction that determines whether it actually works. And most people get this wrong. 100% pure pumpkin puree contains nothing but pumpkin. Pumpkin pie filling contains sugar, spices, and sodium, none of which serve the digestive function you need. Buying the wrong one makes this item completely useless for its intended purpose. The right product delivers meaningful dietary fiber in a gentle, non-irritating form. It restores digestive motility gradually, which is exactly what a stressed system needs, not dramatic intervention. Baseline maintenance? Beyond fiber, pumpkin is a concentrated source of beta-carotene, which the body converts to vitamin A. Vitamin A supports immune function, skin barrier integrity, and mucosal health, all relevant in conditions where minor injuries are more likely and immune.
Challenge is elevated. Takeaway: read the label. Pure pumpkin puree only. Mix it into other preparations rather than eating it alone. A small amount improves the digestibility and nutritional profile of the whole meal. Number 2, evaporated milk. There's a type of breakdown in prolonged crisis scenarios that most survival guides completely ignore. It has nothing to do with calories or physical safety. It's the loss of routine, the small rituals that frame daily life. Morning coffee, a recognizable breakfast, a meal that feels like a meal, serve a function well beyond comfort. They anchor the psychological sense that basic order still exists. They mark time, they signal to the nervous system that things are manageable. When those rituals disappear suddenly and entirely, the effect on morale and cognitive function is measurable. And it happens faster than most people expect. Evaporated milk is one of the few stockpile items that can partially preserve those anchors. Diluted with water in a 1-waiter WEO, it produces a liquid nutritionally and texturally close to whole milk. Coffee becomes coffee again. Porridge takes on a familiar consistency. Meals built entirely from canned goods retain something that feels recognizable. In an environment where nearly every other sensory marker of normal life has been stripped away, That matters more than most people expect. There's a nutritional case too.
Evaporated milk provides calcium, phosphorus, and vitamin D, nutrients that support skeletal integrity and muscle function. Under sustained physical stress, declining calcium status builds slowly and compounds over days. You won't feel it immediately, but once it develops, it becomes progressively harder to recover from. Here's what separates it from sweetened condensed milk, which is worth understanding clearly. Evaporated milk contains no added sugar. It doesn't spike blood glucose. It doesn't create the thirst response that high sugar products produce. It integrates neutrally into almost any preparation, which makes it far more versatile as a daily use item. One useful maintenance detail. Rotate the cans periodically. Upside down for a period, then right side long-term storage and maintains more consistent product quality when you eventually open the can. Takeaway. Store it for the preservation of routine. Coffee, porridge, anything that makes a meal feel like a meal. No refrigeration required. Long shelf life. One of the highest utility to stored space ratios on this entire list. Number 1. Canned sardines. If this entire list comes down to one principle, it's this. In a crisis, functional value is not the same as perceived value. What people stockpile reflects what they enjoy under normal conditions. What actually sustains them under disrupted conditions is determined by a completely probabilistic AHE 9 Bauer IR IK09. Wasbrelman up what that's I. Abduate. You won my bingnai do my meki. You mall now occurs at some undercollar. You won thing up in am I brought I getting move though. Now refrigeration required, long shelf life, one of the highest utility to stored space ratios on this entire list. Number 1, canned sardines. If this entire list comes down to one principle,
Different set of criteria. No item illustrates that gap more clearly than canned sardines. They're not popular. They're not the first thing most people reach for, but in terms of nutritional completeness per unit volume, zero prep readiness, and performance across the widest range of conditions, sardines represent the highest functional value of anything in this category. Here's what's in a single small can. Complete protein. Long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, DHA and EPA. Calcium from the soft, fully edible bones. Phosphorus. Vitamin D and meaningful fat. That is a complete macronutrient and micronutrient profile in one container. No combining, no supplementation. Open the can and every major biological need is at least partially addressed simultaneously. The omega-3 content deserves its own moment. DHA and EPA are not produced efficiently by the human body. Brickant. They have to come from dietary sources. Under sustained stress, when cognitive demands are elevated and every decision carries real consequences. Maintaining adequate omega-3 status directly supports the neurological function required to navigate a crisis effectively. This isn't a marginal benefit. It's a core operational resource, and sardines are among the most concentrated shelf-stable sources.
Available. The bones, softened completely by the canning process and fully edible, provide calcium that requires zero preparation and zero additional resource expenditure. Most people remove them. That's a mistake. Calcium deficiency doesn't announce itself immediately, but under sustained physical stress and disrupted sleep, the degradation of skeletal and muscular function accelerates. Don't discard the oil in the can. It contains concentrated fat, soluble nutrients, and significant caloric density. Use it with the fish. Dress a portion of rice or crackers with it. Incorporate it into any preparation that benefits from fat enrichment. Discarding it means discarding a resource. And under crisis conditions, that's a trade-off you don't want to make. On format, stock both oil-packed and water-packed. Oil-packed delivers higher caloric density, better suited to cold conditions or high exertion periods. Water-packed is lighter and more compatible with preparations where added oil would alter the base flavor. Having both maintains flexibility across changing conditions. And one final advantage worth stating plainly: portability. Sardine cans are among the smallest and lightest in the entire canned food category. A complete nutritional profile fits in a jacket pocket. In any scenario requiring movement, relocation, extended travel, that
Profile is an operational advantage. Nothing else on this list can match. Takeaway: stock both oil-packed and water-packed. Never discard the oil. Leave the bones in. This is the one item on this list that functions as a complete nutritional solution with nothing added. Stockpile planning almost always gets measured by the wrong standard. The more relevant measure is simpler. How many of those items can be opened and consumed without modification under conditions where power is unavailable, water is restricted, and cognitive capacity is reduced? Apply that test to the average household pantry. The answer is rarely encouraging. White rice needs heat and water. Dried pasta needs both. Most protein sources require cooking. The assumption underlying most informal food storage is that some level of normalcy will persist. A functioning stove, running water, the energy to cook, and the mental clarity to make decisions about meal preparation. Every item on this list shares one characteristic. None of them depend on that assumption. The second principle embedded here is nutritional completeness under compounding constraints. The body's requirements don't simplify during a crisis. Protein, fat, micronutrients, omega-3s, calcium, fiber, electrolytes, the need for all of these persists, regardless of what's happening externally. Most individual items address 2 or 3 of those needs. Sardines address nearly all of the exlicate.
Them simultaneously. That's why they rank first. And the third principle, the one almost no survivalist ever addresses, is psychological sustainability. A stockpile that is nutritionally adequate but psychologically intolerable will be abandoned. Appetite fatigue, digestive discomfort, the loss of any meal that feels recognizable, these are not soft concerns. They are the specific mechanisms through which technically sufficient stockpiles fail in practice. Canned tomatoes, evaporated milk, sweetened condensed milk, canned music, chili. These items exist partly because they preserve the human dimension of eating in conditions that strip away nearly everything else. The test isn't complicated. Look at what you currently have stored. Ask one question. Can this be opened and consumed right now without any additional input in a way that provides meaningful nutritional value? If yes, it belongs. If the answer requires a conditional, if I have water, if I have power, if I have time, it's not survival food. It's normal food stored in a space meant for something more reliable. Here's the only challenge I'll leave you with. Pick 3 items from this list, just 3. This week, when you're already at the store, add them to your cart. Next week, music, add 3 more. Within a month, you've built something that actually functions. Not just a pantry that looks prepared. And here's the thing, most people don't think